The ancient world holds many mysteries that continue to puzzle scholars, theologians, and researchers today. Among the most fascinating and controversial topics found in biblical texts is the story of the Nephilim, beings described as giants who once walked the earth. But what if these mysterious figures didn't simply disappear into history? What if their descendants still live among us today? The biblical foundation. Who were the Nephilim? To understand the modern implications, we must first examine the ancient sources. The Nephilim appear in the Bible in two primary locations, and their brief mentions have sparked centuries of debate and speculation. The first reference appears in Genesis 6:4, which states, "The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown." This passage places the Nephilim in the pre-flood world, suggesting they were the offspring of unions between divine beings and human women. The second mention occurs in Numbers 13:33, when the Israelite spies report on the inhabitants of the Promised Land. "We saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." This reference indicates that Nephilim or their descendants survived the Great Flood and continued to exist in later generations. The Hebrew word Nephilim itself provides clues to their nature. Scholars debate its exact meaning, but many connect it to the root nephal, meaning to fall. This has led to interpretations ranging from fallen ones to those who cause others to fall, or even giants who fell upon others in battle. Ancient interpretations and expanding legends. Early Jewish and Christian writers extensively discussed the Nephilim, often expanding far beyond the brief biblical mentions. The Book of Enoch, an influential ancient text not included in the biblical canon, provides detailed accounts of these beings. According to Enoch, the Nephilim were giants standing 300 cubits tall, approximately 450 feet, who consumed vast quantities of food and eventually turned to cannibalism, devouring humans. The Book of Jubilees, another ancient text, describes how the Nephilim's violence and corruption became so great that it prompted God to send the flood to cleanse the earth. However, these sources also suggest that some Nephilim knowledge and possibly bloodlines survived the catastrophe through various means. Early church fathers like Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, and Clement of Alexandria generally accepted the interpretation that the Nephilim were offspring of angels and humans. This view remained dominant in Christian thought for centuries until alternative interpretations gained popularity during the medieval period. The survival question: how could they have endured? One of the most intriguing aspects of the Nephilim narrative is the apparent contradiction between their destruction in the flood and their later appearance in the Promised Land. This has led to several theories about how Nephilim genetics or essence could have survived. The first theory suggests that the flood wasn't completely global, or that some Nephilim survived in isolated regions. Proponents of this view point to various flood traditions from cultures worldwide, noting that local floods might have been interpreted as global events by ancient peoples with limited geographical knowledge. A second theory proposes that Nephilim genetics survived through Noah's family line. Some interpretations suggest that one of Noah's daughters-in-law carried Nephilim DNA, allowing these unusual traits to continue into the post-flood world. This would explain how giants could appear among the Canaanites and other groups the Israelites encountered. A third possibility involves ongoing supernatural intervention. If the original Nephilim resulted from unions between divine beings and humans, similar interactions could have occurred after the flood, producing new generations of giants and unusual beings. Archaeological evidence and ancient monuments. Modern archaeological discoveries have provided intriguing correlations with ancient accounts of giants and unusual beings. Throughout the world, researchers have uncovered massive stone structures that seem to require extraordinary strength and knowledge to construct. The megalithic structures at Baalbek in Lebanon feature stone blocks weighing over 800 tons, precisely cut and fitted together. The precision and scale of this construction challenge conventional understanding of ancient capabilities. Similar questions arise regarding Stonehenge, the Egyptian pyramids, and numerous other ancient monuments worldwide. In North America, Native American traditions frequently mention encounters with giants. The Paiute people of Nevada tell stories of red-haired giants called the Sea Teka, whom they claim to have battled and eventually defeated. Archaeological excavations in Nevada's caves have reportedly uncovered unusually large skeletal remains, though many of these finds remain controversial or have been lost to history. Historical accounts from early American settlers and explorers frequently mention discoveries of giant skeletons. Newspaper reports from the 1800s and early 1900s regularly featured stories of 7 to 12-foot skeletons discovered during construction projects or archaeological digs. While skeptics argue these accounts were exaggerated or fabricated, the sheer volume of such reports across different regions and time periods raises questions. Genetic anomalies and modern giants. Contemporary science has identified various genetic conditions that can produce exceptional height and unusual physical characteristics. Gigantism, caused by excess growth hormone, can result in individuals reaching heights of 8 feet or more. Acromegaly produces enlarged facial features and extremities. These conditions might explain some ancient accounts of giants. However, some researchers propose that certain genetic anomalies might represent remnants of ancient Nephilim DNA. They point to rare conditions that produce not just unusual size but also exceptional strength, altered bone density, or other characteristics that align with ancient descriptions of the Nephilim. The discovery of DNA from extinct human subspecies like Neanderthals and Denisovans has proven that modern humans carry genetic material from multiple ancient populations. This has led some to speculate whether other, more unusual genetic lineages might also persist in the modern gene pool. Certain families and bloodlines throughout history have shown recurring patterns of exceptional height, strength, or other unusual characteristics. The Wadlow family, which produced Robert Wadlow, the tallest recorded human at 8'11", demonstrates how genetic factors can consistently produce extraordinary physical traits across generations. Historical accounts and unexplained encounters. Throughout recorded history, various cultures have reported encounters with beings that match descriptions of the Nephilim or their descendants. These accounts span different continents and time periods, suggesting either persistent legends or ongoing encounters with unusual beings. Medieval European chronicles contain numerous references to giants and supernatural beings. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle and various Celtic texts describe encounters with beings of extraordinary size and strength. Some of these accounts might represent exaggerated memories of conflicts with physically imposing enemies, but others contain details that seem to go beyond normal human variation. During the Age of Exploration, European explorers frequently reported encounters with unusually tall peoples in various parts of the world. Magellan's crew described meeting giants in Patagonia, though later measurements suggest these giants were probably just very tall by European standards. However, some accounts describe beings with characteristics that go beyond simple height differences. The American frontier period produced numerous accounts of encounters with giants and unusual beings. Stories from miners, settlers, and Native Americans often describe beings living in remote caves or mountains, possessing great strength and sometimes hostile intentions toward ordinary humans. Modern sightings and contemporary evidence. In recent decades, reports of giant humanoid encounters have continued to emerge from various parts of the world. While many can be dismissed as hoaxes or misidentifications, some cases present compelling evidence that warrants serious investigation. Photographic and video evidence, while often disputed, occasionally surfaces showing individuals or groups of exceptional size. Enhanced digital analysis techniques allow researchers to examine these materials more thoroughly than ever before. While most prove to be hoaxes or optical illusions, a small percentage remain unexplained. Remote sensing technology has identified anomalous structures and formations in isolated regions worldwide. Satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar have revealed underground complexes and massive stone arrangements that don't match known archaeological patterns. Some researchers suggest these might represent hidden settlements or burial sites of giant peoples. DNA analysis of unusual skeletal remains continues to yield surprising results. While most ancient remains show expected genetic patterns, occasional specimens display anomalies that don't fit standard human genetic variation. These cases often generate controversy within the scientific community and are frequently suppressed or disputed. The bloodline theory, elite families and hidden heritage. One of the most controversial theories suggests that Nephilim bloodlines have been deliberately preserved through certain elite family lineages. Proponents argue that these families have maintained their unusual genetic heritage through careful breeding practices and have used their inherited advantages to accumulate power and influence throughout history. This theory points to the recurring patterns of exceptional height, longevity, and intellectual capacity found among certain ruling dynasties and aristocratic families. Historical analysis shows that many royal bloodlines claim divine or semi-divine ancestry, potentially echoing ancient memories of Nephilim heritage. The concept of blue blood nobility might represent more than just social distinction. Some researchers suggest that certain genetic markers associated with aristocratic lineages might indicate non-human DNA components inherited from ancient Nephilim ancestors. Secret societies and esoteric organizations throughout history have allegedly preserved knowledge of these bloodlines and their significance. Masonic traditions, Rosicrucian teachings, and various mystical schools claim to maintain ancient wisdom about the true nature of human origins and the continued presence of non-human influences in human society. Scientific perspectives and skeptical analysis. Mainstream science approaches Nephilim theories with considerable skepticism, pointing to the lack of verifiable physical evidence and the tendency for extraordinary claims to rely on anecdotal accounts or disputed findings. Genetic studies have not identified any human DNA sequences that clearly indicate non-human ancestry beyond the known introgression from Neanderthals and other extinct human subspecies. Anthropologists note that stories of giants and supernatural beings appear in virtually all human cultures, suggesting these might represent universal mythological themes rather than historical memories. The prevalence of such stories could indicate common psychological or social needs, rather than shared encounters with actual giants. Archaeological establishments have been criticized for allegedly suppressing evidence of giant discoveries, but many researchers argue that supposed cover-ups actually reflect the normal scientific process of rejecting poorly documented or fraudulent claims. The burden of proof for extraordinary claims requires extraordinary evidence, which has not been forthcoming. However, some scientists acknowledge that human understanding of ancient history and genetic diversity remains incomplete. New archaeological discoveries regularly challenge established timelines and assumptions about ancient civilizations. The possibility of unknown human subspecies or unusual genetic variations cannot be entirely dismissed. Implications for modern society. If Nephilim descendants do exist among modern populations, the implications would be profound. Such a discovery would revolutionize understanding of human history, genetics, and the nature of biblical and mythological accounts. The identification of Nephilim bloodlines could explain certain persistent inequalities and power structures in human society. If some individuals possess genetic advantages inherited from ancient giants, this might account for the concentration of power and influence among certain family lineages throughout history. Religious and theological implications would be equally significant. The confirmation of Nephilim survival would validate certain interpretations of biblical prophecy and eschatology. Some believe that the return or revelation of the Nephilim is connected to end times events and the final conflict between good and evil. Social dynamics could shift dramatically if the existence of genetically distinct human populations became widely accepted. Questions of rights, responsibilities, and relationships between different human subspecies would require careful consideration to avoid discrimination or conflict. The search continues. Modern investigation methods. Contemporary researchers employ increasingly sophisticated methods to investigate Nephilim theories. Genetic analysis techniques can identify trace amounts of ancient DNA and map genetic relationships across populations. Archaeological remote sensing can locate buried structures and anomalous formations without extensive excavation. Digital databases allow researchers to correlate historical accounts, archaeological findings, and genetic data across vast time periods and geographical regions. Pattern recognition software can identify recurring themes and anomalies that might escape human observation. Crowdsourced investigation efforts have emerged, allowing amateur researchers to contribute observations and data to larger research projects. Social media platforms enable rapid sharing of potential evidence and collaborative analysis of unusual findings. However, the same technologies that enable better research also make hoaxes and misinformation easier to create and distribute. Critical evaluation of evidence becomes increasingly important as the volume of available information continues to grow. Conclusion: the ongoing mystery. The question of whether Nephilim descendants live among us today remains open. While definitive proof remains elusive, the accumulation of historical accounts, archaeological anomalies, and genetic mysteries suggests that human origins and diversity may be more complex than mainstream science currently acknowledges. The biblical accounts of the Nephilim, whether interpreted literally or symbolically, point to profound questions about human nature and destiny. The persistent global traditions of giants and supernatural beings indicate that these stories address fundamental aspects of human experience and memory. Whether the Nephilim represent literal genetic inheritance from ancient giants, symbolic representations of human potential and corruption, or something else entirely, their story continues to captivate human imagination and challenge conventional understanding. The search for answers continues, driven by advancing technology, persistent legends, and the human desire to understand our true origins and nature. As new discoveries emerge and analytical capabilities improve, the mystery of the Nephilim and their possible modern presence may finally be resolved. Until then, the disturbing possibility remains that among us walk the descendants of the ancient giants, carrying within their genes the legacy of a forgotten age when the line between human and divine was less clearly drawn. Their presence, if real, would represent both a link to humanity's mysterious past and a preview of its potentially extraordinary future. The evidence may be controversial and the theories speculative, but the questions raised by the Nephilim narrative demand serious consideration. In a world where genetic engineering and human enhancement technologies are rapidly advancing, the ancient accounts of hybrid beings and enhanced humans take on new relevance and urgency. Whether we are alone in our humanity or share the world with the hidden descendants of ancient giants remains one of the most compelling mysteries of our time.